Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Graham. I'm so glad that you took some time out of your schedule today to join us. We've got a great episode coming up. I'm here with my co-host, Pastor Kevin Nderitu. Make some noise, And behind the camera is Johan. Johan is just got us some new equipment today. So if this sounds better, if we look better, shout out to Johan. But hey, we started this podcast not because we didn't have anything to do. We have lots to do. We started this podcast because we want to help you learn how to be in the world but not of the world. And we've been pastoring here in DC for a number of years here at the District Church, helping equip young Christians to know how to engage their faith in culture without becoming too much like culture. We want to help you learn how to stand firm in your faith, as it says in Ephesians 6, and not be tossed back and forth, because there's a spiritual war that's going on, and we need to discern the times we live in. And so that's our job as the local church, is to help equip you to grow in your faith. And this podcast is sort of going behind the scenes of our church and of those that we love in our church, friends and others that we want to invite here on this podcast. Kevin, tell us who we have on the podcast today. We're pretty excited.
So excited
right
today.
Off the plane.
I'm so excited today. Oh my goodness. This goes way back. Today on the podcast we have Kanjii Mbugua. He's one of the most amazing, most gifted worship pastors that I've had the privilege of knowing for almost 20 years now. Goodness. It's been a long time. Yeah. And I've just had the privilege of being in ministry with this brother, seeing God use him, not just in Kenya. We come from Kenya. And just God using him even globally, and shaping the worship culture, raising up fearless leaders who are now leading different congregations across the world, and just to see what God is doing, even in you and also through you. And now worship pastor at Southwest Church in Southern California. It's a fun place to be, right?
It's a warm place.
It's hot, not warm.
Place.
Warm, not warm.
It's a great place to be over Christmas.
Great understatement, yeah.
And so glad to have you here, Kanji. Welcome.
Thank you, man. Man, I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah.
You guys are brothers on this walk, and when I first saw the first episode, I texted Aaron and I told him, man, this is such a dope idea.
Nice.
And so it's so cool to actually be here with you guys, man.
Awesome. Now you're on this side of the podcast.
Yeah. This is so cool.
So I just got back from Richmond. I was hanging out with my parents this last weekend, helping them go through all their stuff in their house. And my mom found this letter, and I was reading it. It was from 1989.
My goodness.
And she's writing, we're living in Liberia, but we're about to move from Liberia back to the U.S., And there's just this line that stood out to me. I texted it to you from this letter. My mom's writing, so these are all our supporters who help financially support and pray for my parents and our family as we live in Liberia. And she said this, I'm 9 years old at the time. She said, Aaron says he'd give away his new bike, Nintendo game, and all his money if he could live in Kenya.
How cool is that?
At 9 years old.
How cool is that?
So I just feel like I'm in Kenya right now here on this podcast.
So cool,
this is why you get so excited whenever we plan a trip to Kenya.
Yeah, exactly.
There was actually a time a couple years ago
cool.
where you were going to Kenya, and I just had too much travel. I couldn't commit to going to Fearless that year. Shout out to Pastor M, by the way. I hope you're listening to this, because Pastor M is the founder of Mavuno and has been such a spiritual influence in my life and all of our lives here.
Absolutely.
And but I just couldn't make it to Fearless that year. And I texted Pastor M, I'm like, sorry, I can't come and all this stuff. And it's like the day before you're leaving, and you're like, why don't you come? And I checked, and
I remember
ticket prices weren't that high. I got a visa same day which didn't happen, and then I walked up and surprised Pastor M, and I was like, I'm at home in Kenya.
Oh my goodness.
That's crazy, man. As a 9-year-old, but that's pretty amazing. I want to hear that story. That's another podcast.
I know, that's another podcast. In fact, it's a whole story, because
but
I think there's just something powerful about how you guys lived in Liberia and then also moved over to Kuwait. That I think the world needs to hear that story, and just how God influenced and shaped your ministry up to where you are right now.
Because you do have an incredible sense of the global world. That is I'd say is uncommon. Yeah, it's uncommon. Your sense of the global world.
Yeah. Well, I have a heart for them. My parents taught me that, and just from a young age felt called to ministry. But my parents are kind of at the tail end of the west to the rest of missions.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting sitting across the table from both of you guys, and you guys are missionaries to the west, missionaries to the U.S. here.
Yeah.
Because the West, North America and Europe are more unsaved than Africa now, and it really requires us to learn how to understand the cultural moment that we're in. So that's kind of what I want to unpack today.
Oh, wow.
And really ask you, Kanji, like as a worship leader, somebody that's been in this, you've been over 20 years in ministry, leading worship. And I want to unpack like how you have learned to be in the world, but not of the world as it relates as an artist, as a musician, writing songs and others. Tell us your story of getting into worship at Mavuno and in Kenya, and then really helping worship go beyond the walls of the church, because you guys really influence culture. I don't meet, by the way, a person in Nairobi when I'm there that doesn't know Mavuno Church.
Wow.
And part of that is the music and the influence. And so how did you guys do it? Tell me some of that story and of your backstory there.
All right, man. So I have to dig deep. But I think for me, so my story, I'll start with a little bit of my story and then how it kind of connects with a bigger piece. So let's see if we can remember some of these stuff. So basically, I did not start as a worship guy.
Okay.
I started as a Christian musician. I've never been anything other than a faith-based musician. So, but I started out as a Christian entertainer, and a big, very formative portion of my life was touring with a boy band
in the U.S.
In the U.S. Touring the U.S. with a boy band called Milele.
Milele is Swahili for forever.
Yeah. And you've got a great song called Milele, right?
Yeah, we do. It's called Forever.
Forever.
Which is
Milele.
Yeah. So and basically, so I had two roles in the band. So one, I was the lead singer, but secondly is I crafted the shows. I crafted the performances. And in fact, I had a really, I was flying this morning from Palm Springs to DC, and I spent some of the time kind of working on the Christmas, Southwest Christmas experience. And I had a moment of like, oh my goodness, like I remember doing this 30 years ago, and putting together shows and all of that. And so I've always loved the presentation of things, And so I did that for Milele, but it was we were pop. It was Christian, but it was pop.
Yeah.
It was 100% pop. And I always used to look at worship music, and I'd always go like, man, because people would ask me, hey, can you lead worship? And I always be like, nah, I think I'm good. Because I always felt like it was
because Christian worship back then wasn't good.
It was not good.
There's a lot better stuff now. For those of you listening who are younger, it's come a long way.
It's come a long way. And so we're talking about the late 90s and early 2000s. And so anyway, so I find myself now back in Kenya after having had a relatively successful touring with that group Milele, and Pastor M and I had become friends when he was at Fuller in the States at the seminary, but we always used to joke, and the joke always used to be like, "Hey man, I tell him, when you start your own church," because he was working at Nairobi Chapel at the time. I'd be like, "Hey, when you start your own church, I got you. I'll be the worship guy." In my head,
but only for him.
I didn't know how people started churches. I didn't see it as a possibility. Anyway, so fast forward.
But what is it about like the church and being a worship? Tell us more about like what that pause is like. I'm a Christian musician, but I'm going to be in the culture, but not in the church. Like, where was that? help me understand that tension there.
Yeah, I think for me, at that point, it wasn't a very deeply developed idea.
Okay.
It was just like, that's cool, that's not.
Okay.
Like literally, that was
Okay.
the only measuring stick,
totally.
right?
Yeah.
So, and I remember Pastor M asking me to join the worship team, not of his church plant, but of the church he was at, Nairobi Chapel. And every time I'd be like, nah. And I remember once, to put him off, I said, hey, I'll join the worship team if you allow me to reconstruct it. Like, so let everyone go and let me reconstruct it for you. And he's like, that's not going to happen. Great conversation. Yeah. So when we got the opportunity to plant Mavuno, the awesome conversation was like, hey, what would it look like to do church for people who don't like church and for people who find church boring? That's when the connection with culture happened. Because then now it was like, hey, man, we had such deep conversations. And one of the most memorable conversations for me was this idea of that, Christianity is the only religion in the world that doesn't have a culture that you have to embrace to be part of it. Islam, I have to become Arabic, right? And wear Arabic clothes and, pray facing center of the Arab world, which is Mecca, right? And so we talked about how Christianity was so interesting because it always took the form of the culture that it was placed in. And so we started then saying, man, and these conversations were super hypothetical, but they had such practical applications because it was literally, okay, cool. What are the young people that we feel called to? Where are they at? And we're like, man, they're going for concerts. They love concerts. They love art. They love artistic expression. And so we're like, okay, let's do that in the church. So at that point, then now it was literally about, man, how can we create a space that this person who has never had a church experience will come and find some tethers that tell him, hey, you're welcome here, but we're different. And I don't even remember this, Kevin, but we talked about the 100%, where the whole idea was, can we be 100% seeker sensitive, which is we're very conscious of you, but then 100% Holy Spirit filled. And that for us, that blend, so it wasn't a 50-50, it was 100% and 100%. And that just kind of became our philosophy and started something pretty cool, I think.
A lot of times churches today get in this, and we get asked this a lot, like, is your service focused on evangelism or is it focused on discipleship? Is it focused on the newcomer? And it's like, I don't understand. It's both. Yeah, it's like both. Yeah. And it's like, no, the gathering is meant to build up the body of Christ, but you can build bridges to new people and not be weird about it and welcome them, acknowledge them here. Let the non-Christian off the hook when you're about to have a hard word around money or something. This is applied to believers or whatever. And you do that with music as well. You draw them in, but ultimately it's to point them to Christ. Right?
Absolutely. I think, and I think you've pointed out the main thing is that it's a vehicle, it's a tool.
Yeah.
And so where my heart has always been with culture is I always see it as a tool. I don't see it as a goal.
Yeah.
Right. So when we're not trying to be cool for coolness sake.
Yeah.
It's just like, this would be an awesome way of people who have never heard this message to be able to hear it and maybe get curious about it.
Because the thing that I love about even what Christ and how he modeled it for us is he was able to connect with society at where they were. So even the stories that you read about Christ, they were very, they were applicable to them.
First of all, there were stories.
There were stories.
Let's just start there. That's a creative engagement.
How crazy is that? Just to think about it. And I think
made up stories. They weren't he wasn't even telling you historical stories. He was literally making them up.
Oh my goodness.
But profound truth.
Truth. And I think it's powerful for us to see that I don't have to be weird, weirdly different. I can actually embrace someone. I can meet someone where they are. But then I know that my agenda, my mission is God's mission, where I lead them to where God wants them to be. And I think that's
that.
a powerful thing,
I love that,
where
man.
I don't have to. I'm not remaining where we are, but we're actually moving towards where God wants you to be. And I think that's a powerful thing.
Yeah. And you know what that brings to mind for me is kind of like the whole idea of, like, I really love what you said, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's really about being other focused.
Yeah.
Right? It's about the others.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what that is. It's literally saying, okay, God, you've put us in DC. There's a gazillion young people, colleges all over, etc. Yeah. And if I'm thinking of the others and less about myself, then there's some things that I will do that maybe are uncomfortable for me, because I'm like, that's not where I'm at. And I remember once telling telling our team in Nairobi, and there was a kind of like rise of hip hop music, etc. And when we started kind of now engaging culture and trying to figure out musically and creatively, how do you make this work? I remember having this conversation with our team, and it was the whole idea of, hey guys, what we're going to do right now, I think is going to work. But it's going to work so well that it will become the hindrance for the next generation, right? Because we've seen that play before, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And so it was like, so we have to be the place where we're so other focused that there's I've always said that there's a day that's gonna come where trap and hip hop is going to be the music of worship. That day is gonna come, right?
Yeah.
And for us guys, it'd be like,
no.
Yeah.
But you have to be so other focused that you're like, hey, we need to do this because that's their music. And
I mean, it's happening even right now in Africa, where now Afrobeat has made it to the pulpit.
Yep.
You know, and I'm like, it's crazy. Like, I can't imagine my parents grooving.
Oh, they're like, what?
Afrobeat.
So tell us, Kanji, why? I mean, you've already released some worship songs, Afrobeat worship songs, and I think you have an album coming out, several coming out that are Afrobeats worship.
Yeah.
Tell us about the story of why, like why behind that. I mean, it's amazing. But I remember we were talking about our own kids, right?
Yeah, for sure. I guess it's the other focused. And so I made an interesting observation of my kids and of their friends, and I found that their generation really is not listening to Christian music. They're only listening to the Christian music they have to. They don't want to. They listen to the one they have to.
Interesting.
Which is, they listen to music in church. They listen to music that we play. But left to their own devices, they're not opening the phone or the iPad, going to Spotify and going like, "Ooh, some Phil Wickham, let's go." They're going to pop music. And so that for me started bothering me. And so the whole idea was like, what are they listening to? They're listening to pop, Afrobeats music, which is like the number one pop genre in Africa by far. And so then the thought became, okay, is there a way that we can package these same truths, but in stylistically how it works for those Gen Z my kids, and so that was the whole idea behind it, And my whole approach is, I don't know if it will work, but I will most definitely give it a shot, because I'm like, we have to try. We have to try. So every song that we write and work on, before it goes anywhere, I test it on my kids, and it was like, okay, I know I'm your dad, but just, okay, what do you guys think? And they'll go, it's okay. I'm like, okay, cool, we're not here yet. I've not yet gotten them to go like,
My 13-year-old Natalie, her favorite worship song is the Afrobeat Gyra version of Gyra.
Oh, wow.
Like, she doesn't listen to Maverick City version. She's listening to
the Afrobeat version.
The Afrobeat version of Gyra. And I know you've done the 10,000 Reasons, Matt Redman's Afrobeats. What are some of the other ones you've covered, Afrobeats?
So we've done, there's a worship leader, artist called Phil Thompson, and he has a song called My Worship. So we released that. That one's actually
we know that song very well.
We know that song. In fact, Elliot, our worship director, sang backup vocals on the YouTube version with Phil Thompson.
No way.
Back in Boston days. And it's got like, he's had people come up to him in church, here at District Church, being like, I know you from that video. Because it's been shared, like, it's like 40 million views or something on YouTube of My Worship. So you redid that song.
So we redid that, and Phil, first of all, loved it. Like he's
awesome.
Like, but then we've also, so what we've done with this project is we've started with worship songs that people know, that are great worship songs.
Yeah.
So, 10,000 Reasons, My Worship, we have some like old school song like Draw Me Close to You.
All those are coming back right now. They're all coming back now.
And we're working on that. Then I think the second part of the project, or project 2, will be original songs. But the idea there is, I keep on telling them, like, hey guys, I'm actually too old to be doing this. Like, literally. So the idea is to try and create community of people who think the same, right? And find those millennial Gen Z artists and songwriters who be like so excited to like, man, we can write in our style.
That's good.
And use Afrobeats worship as a platform for them to kind of do that for their generation.
I love it. Yeah. What have you learned about ministering in Kenya versus ministering here in the U.S.? What's similar about ministry, whether it's worship ministry or broader ministry? What's similar? What's different? Like what's harder? What's
Yeah, it's interesting. So several years, maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was a worship leader at a Mariners Church in Irvine, California, Kyle. And Kyle, if you're ever watching this, we need to talk about this because I know you won't remember this conversation. Anyway, so we'd come every year to Mariners and do this global weekend, right? And global weekend is almost like the American church permission to be outside of their normal programming, right? So I remember I had someone tell me they were in a meeting and they were just talking about like, hey, this thing that this guy does, come, dance, sing out, raise your hands, all that stuff. And so Kyle's opinion was like, this is just like a one-time thing. Like you can't translate this to an American church. So I'm like, hey, Kyle, I've been 4 years, okay? Translate it. But my thought was, coming in, I thought that human beings are essentially the same. That their yearnings, their aspirations are the same, right? That's why the gospel message works. It's like there's some things that it doesn't matter what culture you are in. It's the same thing. You have a big hole in your heart that only God can fill. You have a desire for eternity. You have a desire for connection. Like all of those things are the same.
That's good.
So my approach, for sure, it's very different, but my approach has been exactly the same. Where it's like, how do we help you build a bigger, grander view of God? How do you build that awe and wonder, which I think is what music does. It helps with awe and wonder.
That's very good.
And so for sure the journey is different. It's a different path to get there. It's funny because like I find that as a worship leader, I'm always, and this is not even the conversation, but it's just a cool thing. I discovered something this last summer as I led worship in Kenya, in Africa. And I found that as a worship leader, one of your jobs is to get people where they are not. So people are somewhere, right? And leadership is, I need to get you where you're not, right? So you're somewhere, I need to get you where you're not.
Management is keeping people where they are and doing it more efficiently, but leadership is taking them to a new place.
Taking them where they're not, right? And so I realized something so interesting as I was leading. is that I was like, for Africa, celebration, immediacy, joy are right there, ready.
Yes.
They're readily available.
Yeah.
And I've always been like, man, in the US, when I lead worship, that's what I'm trying to get them to, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, man, guys, God is now. It's now. You don't,
celebrate
yeah,
now.
celebrate now. Don't, get out of your minds, right? Get out of your head. But I found, interestingly, as I was leading in Kenya, that there's a beauty of the American church, which I realized, oh man, I'm trying to get people in Kenya there. Awe and wonder is harder to get to.
Wow.
It's harder to get to.
But why do you think that is?
I don't know. I'm not too certain. I just remember just being like, man, there's a certain space of quiet and reflection, and that just allows you to maybe your mind to expand, and that's not in African culture as far as music is concerned, right? So for us guys, it's we want revelation to hit. Let's sing this 70 times, and by the time we're on the 70th time, I get it.
Now I
Our
get it.
God is a good God, and I think it's just more of a cultural thing. And here in the States, awe and wonder, I think, is quick. And when you think about it, just think about how Americans, everything is amazing. Super Bowl, amazing. We're world champions. The Noah Lyles thing. World champions of basketball. They're very quick to be in awe of things, and I think that translates to the worship experience, which is interesting. It's how culture now finds its way. So
that's very interesting hearing you say that, especially coming from a Kenyan context and experiencing that, because in essence, I think there's such a huge affirmation there when it comes to even the American church and what we can learn from one another, because the beauty about it, and I think I'm learning that even from our congregation, that we all, we come to this space, and there's a powerful thing about my culture, my experiences, and what I've gone through, and who I am, and where I've been raised, my background, my history, all this, is beneficial for who we are becoming as one. Because I hear you say that, and I'm thinking, it's easy for me to see my culture and my upbringing as superior than yours. And I think we make that mistake a lot of times.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Where one of the things that I had, especially when I was coming into the country, I had a lot more people saying, African, I'm so glad that you're here, because the American church is people will even say is dying, and we need to be infused by the African anointing. And I was like,
no, wait, what's the thing? Angels from Africa.
What is
and
this?
I'm like, angels from Africa.
Angels from Africa.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think that's a I really believe that there's something powerful that God is also doing in the church in America, that we cannot discount that, and it's, how do I bring what I have, but in humility, submit that to what God is already doing within the context. And that way, when we all come and we submit, because the one thing that I love about our church is that we have a mixed congregation of people from all streams of
I keep on
the
saying
gospel.
Most multi-ethnic church in America.
I know.
By far.
I know. It's very different, but there's a beauty about that, and I think we need to appreciate that, especially as the global world is becoming smaller and smaller. Where we are globalized even more and more, and different spaces that we enter into, then we can be able to appreciate, how do I lean into what you are learning and what God is raising you to be. And I think that's how we even are strengthened within our culture, because it's easy for me to come into my culture and choose to just remain as me but I don't appreciate what God is doing in someone else's
for
life.
sure.
And
For sure.
so I think just hearing you say that, even from an African context, a Kenyan context, and affirming what God is doing even within the American context, that's powerful. From a worship context.
Kanji, one of the things you're super passionate about, I know, is just seeing congregations respond in worship. We've actually been talking about that a lot. That word respond. How do we respond to God? Tell us more about that passion. Why are you so even beyond whether it's Kenya or US, like in general, just God's people, seeing them respond? What does that look like physically? What does that mean spiritually?
Yeah, well, and man, there's so many kind of like just layered ideas and thoughts and theology that helped me kind of maybe wrap my head around it, and I'm still wrapping my head around it. But let's talk about psychology for a second. So, your actions and what you do, how your body responds, is directly linked to how you feel, right? So, for example, smile, joy, right? Frown, anger, right? And so there's a place where your body is so vital for expressing what is in your heart. And so when I think of responding, that's one of the things that comes to mind for me. And you're like, man, there's a joy that's inside of us. There's knowledge of maybe God coming through for you, which is just straight up relief, man. I just thank God that He's in my life, right? And I think there's something that does for us. But secondly, I think there's something it does for God, right? When you talk about the three elements of a person, right? Which is your mind, your emotions, and your body, right? All my heart, all my mind, and all my strength, right? And I feel that there is a way of loving God with all your being, right? So for those of you who are cerebral, you need to do this, right? You can't just think it. It's with some of us who are emotional, I need to think it, right? And because it needs to be all my being, right? But then there's also what it does to the corporate, to the room, right? It's not a 1 + 1 = 2. There's something that happens when all of us are honestly chasing after God, that is a multiplier. You'll have, we've all been in those spaces and those rooms where there was just a hunger and a desperation for God. And what happens is faith multiplies. And faith multiplies like, I didn't have as much faith, but I'm seeing your faith, and your faith is inspiring me to have faith, right? And so I think they're just like, it's one of those things that the more you think about it, the more it's like, man, I wish churches could understand this. Another reason for me is music is a metaphor. Worship is not music, right? Music is just simply, worship is.
Music is an expression. Music
is
one of the expressions.
Worship is about surrender.
Totally.
So music is the easiest space for you to be able to express your surrender. It's with people who are doing the same thing. So I always feel like, man, worshipers live better lives.
Interesting.
And worshipers, it's easier for them to surrender. It's easier for them to surrender in other spaces of their lives. So for me, it's a desperation. I'm like, man, guys, if you can get this, your life is actually going to be better. Chasing after God. And so that's why I get so passionate about getting the congregation to respond. The last reason, I could go on, by the way, but the Bible talks about there are many words, but there are 7 main words of praise, right? They're all actions.
Interesting.
They're all actions. Shabak, shout. yada. With hands uplifted, like you've got all of these words that God has given us, which is God was telling us this is how to praise me. But they're all actions, right?
Yeah.
So it's so if nothing else, then let's do what God has asked us to do.
That's right.
Even forget the benefits and everything. Let's just do what He asked us to do. So I think for me that's why it's such a big thing for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this before, but it's like one of the ways you can serve your pastor in your church is to sit in the middle, come early, and respond in worship, because it's amazing how like 20 people in a room can shape the atmosphere.
Wow.
And so many folks can be focused on like, oh, I got to be on the worship team and I got to be on stage. And it's like, no, you actually can shape a room. And, when it's authentic, coming from your heart, but responding. And it's amazing how a multicultural church can actually create a new kingdom culture. And music is what drives so much of culture.
Absolutely.
And so, I praise God for your gifts. I love your heart for raising up worship leaders and so worshiping congregations, but also worshiping leaders. What would you say to somebody who's young, who, maybe on a worship team at their church, or they're kind of aspiring maybe to write for the first time, or they're considering maybe, do I want to go into ministry and do worship? What are some common mistakes that young people can make, maybe some that you made, or just ones that you see that they make in terms of how they see themselves or how they approach the ministry, that maybe you can encourage those who are listening, who are kind of at that early end of worship ministry?
That's great. I think maybe I'd start with a caution for the church in general, right? Because I think, and I don't like generalizing, but it's such a common thing of caring for the gift more than the person, right? And so you're hunting for musicians. You're hunting. Oh man, that one can sing. That one can, right? And I think for me, there's a space for the discipleship because it's such a, when you talk about the people who fall the hardest, I think it's pastors and worship leaders, right? Right? Like you fall
That's
hard,
good.
man. And so I think for me, there's something that's in my heart for, man, how do you make sure that you care for the people more than the gift? And so, but it's almost flip that now to the young person out there who's, hey, man, I've got a gift, right? Number one, for me, make sure you're under a ministry, you're under someone, right?
What do you mean by that?
And what I mean by that is make sure that you are in a space where you're being mentored, you're being discipled, you're being poured into, and you have someone in your life who is not overwhelmed by your gift, right? Because you have fans, and a lot of people will go like, hey. I'm like, no, you need someone who's like,
Unimpressed,
right? And
you have to seek that person out.
You have to seek that person out.
Don't wait for them to seek you out.
You've got to seek them out. You've got to seek them out.
You go see them.
Absolutely.
Don't make them come to you.
And I mean, we've kind of talked about how Pastor M of Mavuno Church has played a role in our lives, and so it's definitely a major discipler for me. And man, I don't think he listens to my music. In fact, I'm pretty sure he doesn't. Right?
Didn't he come to hear you when you were a boy band?
Maybe
once.
Maybe once. And I think the one time he came, he said, "Hey, you guys are nice suits." That was his feedback. But just someone who's not impressed, right? And I think that's so vital. Because you've got to take care of we're human beings, not human doings. So take care of the spiritual you first, even before you get into the doing. Because if you set that foundation right, man, you're gonna go. Can go far, right?
Good.
So I'd say that's super important. Then the second thing, obviously, then now is surrounding yourself with as much as you can. Sometimes you're just not in a situation where there's a better musician or someone who can be able to pour now into you from a skill point of view. But I keep on saying, man, YouTube is your friend. My current traveling music director is a 23-year-old kid from Venezuela. And he's one of the best, and I know many piano players. He's one of the best I've played with.
Wow.
At
23 years old from a war-torn country. YouTube taught.
Wow. YouTube taught.
Come on.
I was like he learned everything from YouTube. So
Wow.
YouTube is your friend. You
Yes.
know, like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, you can level up your skill. And I talk to that to worship leaders a lot, where I'm like, your skill development is not a destination. It's a stewardship.
Yep.
Right? Where you're basically saying,
That's powerful,
you know,
yeah.
I'm still practicing to this day. And it's just basically saying, man, I want to tap every single resource that God gave me.
Yeah.
And so just having that mindset of, hey, like the music, the musicality, that side of things, I want to keep on pushing myself and striving for
That's good.
as great as God can give me.
Yeah.
So I'd say those two things, balancing those, like making sure that you're grounded in your faith and you have, you know, someone that you've given permission to be that person in your life. That's gonna help you.
Yeah.
It's gonna help you. I cannot stress how much it's gonna help you. But on the other side, then now figuring out, man, how do I develop my skill?
That's good.
How do I keep working on my skill?
That's good. Yeah. I think it's, you know, I think we give similar advice to young preachers who are feeling called to ministry.
Yeah.
And, you know, the stage can be so tempting if you have a real gift.
Yeah.
And then people start wanting your gift.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking, and when we're raising up teaching team and others and pouring into young pastors, I'm looking for people who feel called to preach no matter what the context, right? Like that you want to go to the homeless shelter and preach to 3 people. And like that gives you joy.
That is so good.
You know, it's like you're a young musician that you want to go and you'll go play at the subway stop for anybody for like donations because you just love music. You just love ministering. You know, and I think that would be my encouragement to young people, regardless of being called to ministry, especially if you feel called to the stage. Wow. Like and that's the covering part. You need somebody that's not impressed with you that can talk about how, you know, for me, I preached in an abandoned auto repair shop as a pastor for 5 years to no more than 40 people. Wow. Right. So it's like I stand on the stage now and however many people are there, it's like I've done the reps before.
Yeah, you have.
And that's like where, you know, and it's like my gratification doesn't come from how many people are there. Now, of course, you want your message to get out to people, but that's not where the true joy comes. But that's that discipleship part that, you know, I know we as a church and I know you as a worship leader are really committed to pouring in to this next generation. Now, tell us about Pambio Worship. Because this is what you're doing with the global church.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to make a small tangent because we have a funny story of preaching. It wasn't you. Who was it who Pastor Oscar told to preach a message for 7 days to an empty room?
Oh, no, it wasn't me. I can't remember who it was, but
so
it wasn't
anyway,
me.
One of our friends, Bishop Oscar, was, you know, it's like
founder of Nairobi Chapel.
Founded Nairobi Chapel, and so someone, hey, I want to preach, and it was Moreo, one of our friends, and he had this guy preaching to an empty room for 7 days.
Yeah. Wow.
And he'd come
building.
and he'd come and listen for like a few minutes and tell him you need to rewrite that. But he was testing his commitment. And testing, like, do you just want people? Do you want the glory?
Totally.
Or do you want, or has God put something in your heart that you just have to share, right? And I think that's a point you're kind of making. Of like, hey, who are you? Who are you when it's quiet?
Pastor Stuart McAlpine in our church, who's a spiritual father to me, talks about his dad was in ministry too, and taught him to write sermons that you will never preach to anybody. And if you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to write songs that will only be for the Lord,
that will never go anywhere.
That will never.
You know, and you pray that your stuff goes. You're not willing to spend time in God's word apart from what you're preparing. I mean, that principle I think is so important, especially for this generation. There's so much temptation in the Instagram world and the YouTube world to be public so quick.
Yeah.
Jesus spent 18 years of ministry preparation from 12 years old in the temple to 30 years before he did his first miracle.
Yeah.
You know, and he was the Son of God.
Yeah.
And that's powerful.
So who are you?
Yeah, I know. and I think even as we're talking about like standing firm in this culture, it's powerful to hear that from a worship perspective, or a worship leader's perspective, and also a pastor or a preacher's perspective, that the principles are similar.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because sometimes we can feel like, well, my path is different. You know, I need to journey differently from other people. But it comes down to discipleship. It comes down to who are you surrounding yourself to. Like that's the bottom line, you know. Yeah. Like and I think regardless of whether you're in business, politics, who are the people who are speaking into your life? Yeah. Who's pouring into your life?
Yeah.
And then also who are you surrounding yourself? Because it's a process, you know. And I think a lot of us, you know, can struggle, or people can struggle through this culture because you don't have the right systems in place.
And
you're talking about discipleship, you're talking about pouring. And I think even as you're talking about Pambio, which is something now you're doing, pouring into the next generation. You know, it's discipleship. You've gone ahead, you've seen the journey that you've taken. They don't have to make the same mistakes that you made. They can learn from your mistakes. You know, and how do we be humble enough to learn from those who've gone ahead of us? You know, I can see how, you know, Bishop Oscar saying something like that, and I'm thinking, what do you know? Like, why do you want me to do this? You know, and I know we've gone through that arrogance. So I don't know. Maybe as you share your experience about Pambio, it's just a great reminder that some principles actually cut across regardless of what sector of society you are in.
Absolutely, man. With Pambio, so for our podcast squad, so Pambio is a group of young worship leaders in Kenya, 22 to be exact. And a few years ago, I just there was a stirring in my heart about kind of like my final ministry sprint. I think at some point you stop sprinting. And I was just like, okay, Lord, you know, what are the things that you're putting on my heart? And one of the biggest things was this journey that God has put me on. Like, I felt like it would be such a shame if it was wasted on me, right? And discipleship has always been part and parcel because I was discipled. I've always discipled, but I think for me there was almost like an urge to, hey, man, how do I pour fuel on this idea and disciple more and more and more and more, and create a discipleship mechanism for worship leaders? And what kind of struck me was a statement I made earlier, which was, man, you can learn how to be a great musician on YouTube. But I just didn't find a lot of resources for the heart of worship. And how can you be discipled as a worship leader? And this is now about your marriage. This is about how you're relating with the opposite sex. This is literally about your money. This is your faith, your quiet time.
It's not just about
have quiet
your
time.
gift.
Do you spend time with the Lord? So it's not about.
There's no shortcuts to this.
There's no shortcuts, bro. There's no shortcuts. So I started. I got these worship leaders together, and started pouring into them. And man, it's been such an incredible journey. Man, it's this. I keep on saying this is the best thing I do, and it's not even close. It's the best thing I do, and seeing what God is doing in these young people, but more importantly, also seeing them now start taking these ideas and finding their own disciples, right? And so with this 22. Our network of worship leaders is about 100 now. Wow,
because they're raising people up.
Exactly, because they're doing the same. And I keep on telling them, I'm like, guys, and it took some like a lot of reflection for me to get to the place where I was like, and it sounds like an arrogant statement, but it's actually a humility that got me there. And looking at these young people, and just saying, you know what? I know more about everything than you. I know more about everything than you. I know more about money making and losing. I know more about relationships.
Yeah.
I know more about I just know more. I just lived longer. And it has nothing to do with me. It's just and so at that point then I was like, oh man, because there are things I'd be shy to share because I'm like, what should I talk to you about money? I've not made much. And then at some point I was like, no, I know more than you. I know about stewardship.
That's good.
So I think then now the conversations now really expanded with this group where I'm involved at a very intrusive level in their lives. But the idea is, hey, you know more than someone. Right? So find those people and pour into them.
But these are a lot of men and women in Kenya, and I know you have a vision globally for this. But right now in Kenya, that maybe don't have access. They don't have the resources or access to be able to find this level of discipleship with somebody like you. That's what I love about it too, is that you're being intentional about finding them and then cultivating them, even though you're asking a big time commitment from them as well.
Yeah, for sure. But it's a two-way street, man. It's, in fact, I keep on telling them, guys, I'm getting more from you guys than you guys are getting from me. I remember.
Awesome.
So how the structure happened is, and district church has been a key component. I keep on saying district church is my sending church. And when we put together like a worship training and got these 22 people out of 120 applications.
Wow.
So we got 22.
Wow.
And I remember being in a room worshiping with these 22, and I can remember like it was yesterday. Like I remember my faith just being activated, and I remember texting my wife, and I was like, "Babe, you need to be here." Like I've never been in a room where everyone. It's like desperation was upping each other, right?
Wow.
That was so desperate for God to move, and the breakthrough that they experienced in that space, I was like, man, I don't want to do anything else with my life. Like this is it. So they helped me find purpose as well.
That's powerful.
I love it.
That's powerful. I think it's about legacy, and it's interesting because you talk about, you're blessed to be a blessing. And the simplest way that I've defined discipleship for me is that I've taken one step and I just need to show you how to take that step, and so your more is more than enough. For those who are coming after us. And I think, those of us who, every one of us has been blessed. And I think we need to start asking ourselves, how are we passing on? And I think, again, back to the subject, where how we get to really stand firm, to build this resilient faith for us is, I'm able to see those who've gone ahead of me. And because you become a reference point now for them. A 23-year-old, a 24-year-old is looking at you and thinking, if Kanji made it, I can make it.
Bro, they're so young. We had to find a name for them to call me. I was like, because African culture, you just can't call me by my name. So they call me Uncle Kanji.
Uncle Kanji. I love it.
I know.
Uncle Kanji.
It was like I'm like
I love it.
You're literally just slightly older than my kids. So
and it's also biblical when you think about even how older women are also exhorted to teach younger women. And it's just powerful to see that there has to be this passing on. We quote Paul many times, and how he mentored, someone like Timothy. And it's a blessing to also see this, because there is no way you can be a giant of faith standing by yourself in this community. You have to have people who've gone ahead of you, and you have to have people surrounding you. And I think also now, which you're brought out with what you're doing in Pambio, is who are the people who are coming after you, and how if the next generation, in fact, our success is predicated on their success. Like, how do we make sure that they are set up for success?
Man, that is I love that, man. Like I think that is such a key conversation. I think especially for us guys who've been able to we have some sphere of influence. even going back to your earlier thing, Aaron, of like, that culture and faith and, and so it's about, number one, realizing that, hey, there's a world out there that needs to be reached, right? And so we're not going to be bubble Christians, living in our bubble. So we need to go out. But I have to go out with wisdom.
Yeah, and covering.
And how I do that is being discipled.
Totally.
I have that covering. And someone who says, hey, go. I'm taken back to when we started Mavuno. One of the cool things that we did was we did a club event every month where we'd
Live at the
go
Village.
and do it was called Live at the Village. It's crazy. My worship nights are called Village Worship Nights now. I'm
Nice.
But Live at the Village was, we'd go into like the number one club in Nairobi, and we'd do this amazing experience that was pure entertainment. We were dancing, singing, the whole works, entertaining people. And number one, we were undercover. So we didn't go there and get lost. Right? So it was always like, hey, you guys, we're sending you to go out and do this. It's very different. So, because if you came and looked at it, it'd be like, man, this is just a secular gig. They're singing love songs and they're doing this and they're doing that. But we were undercover, very importantly. The second thing is we knew why we were there. Because at the end of every show, we'd tell people, hey, we have a gig every Sunday morning. at this place here. Here's the address. 10 a.m. Come out and check us out.
I love it.
And being able to again draw people back in and I mean those are some of our funnest memories of church planting for us, for sure.
Absolutely.
I love it. That's really the call of the church, is to raise up disciples who really make disciples, but impact culture. That's that we can shape culture. We can start movements that are coming out of the church. And I think when you study church history, you see that the greatest art that's come throughout history has often come from the church. You see these cathedrals and these stained glass. And so with music and other things, the church needs to get back to be the leader
of culture,
of that and shaping. And I think one of my big takeaways from this conversation today is it's not just about the gift. There is the gift that's given by God, and God gives gifts without repentance. So there's people in the world that have amazing musical gifts and artist gifts. There's spiritual gifts that are given when you give yourself to Christ. But the main point is that you don't get to pick what your gift is. You get to pick whether you nurture it and make it better. But that's what God gets to do. But then there's the formation that's happening in our hearts as disciples. And, I've interacted with a lot of pastors in Nashville. I'm from Tennessee back in the day. My best friend Chris lives in Nashville, so I get there a lot. And I often visit with pastors of different churches in Nashville. And I always ask them about their worship ministry. Because it's like, if you're in Nashville and your worship ministry is not good, it's why is that? Because
you are the problem.
You're the problem. It's like Music City. People move there to make it big in music. And so there's just so many musicians everywhere. But one of the things that I've heard as a theme in Nashville with churches is that people think that their gift is just going to get them on the stage immediately because their gift is used out there. And the best and healthiest churches are like, no. We want to know first if you want to be discipled. And if you're going to really embrace the culture of this church. And so it takes some people off guard who are like well-known.
Oh, wow.
Who are like, I just want to bring this in here. And it's like, no. Do you want to be a disciple? Because you know what? This stuff we do on Sunday, whether we're preaching or leading worship, like this isn't a game. This isn't entertainment. Like we do the work during the week. And the work in the week is in our hearts and stuff. And I think for a lot of folks who are listening and are discouraged about the church and it's like leaders are falling and all that stuff. And, who whoever thinks he stands, take heed lest he fall. We all have to watch ourselves. But what we're saying is like real church happens Monday through Saturday. And Sunday when we get together and we worship and it's an incredible set or there's a sermon and all this stuff happens, that's what the Holy Spirit does. But it's really just a celebration of what's happening throughout the week.
Preach.
And that's my heart for this next generation is that we've got to do the work of discipleship.
Yeah, we have to.
And that, one of my big takeaways from our conversation today with you is that we have to seek out spiritual covering. Like, especially if you have a great gift.
Yeah.
Especially.
The more the gift, the more
more covering you need.
The more covering you need.
Yeah.
And you got to be in community with others, but you also have to be around people that aren't impressed with you, but love you. And will speak the truth in love to you. And
the thing for me
that's so good, bro.
that is very convicting, especially for those of us who are responsible for over congregations, to whom much is given, much is expected. And when I think about the fact that the role that you play in leading, you're leading a congregation, you're leading God's people every single day. That stuff gets you scared because you're thinking, man, if I mess this up, I'm like, God is also my audience. In fact, God is my audience in this very moment. And I think how much more should we desire this? And I think human nature is that we will fall, we will fail oftentimes, but how is it that we are always running towards God with what we're doing? And how do we take what's going on in here very think critically about that, what's going on even in our minds. Recently I said, worship is not just about the music that we bring, it's about the hearts that we bring. It's not just about the music that we use, because often we can think about my gift is just about the gift that I use and I bring it into that space. But no, what's the heart that I'm bringing into this place? Who am I bringing into this place? And is there a formation that is happening in that? Because the more vulnerable and surrendered I become, the better I become as an individual, and the better in fact, the more my gift will be nurtured, the better I become within me.
So good. Kanji, tell us where folks can connect with you to learn more, your website, to follow you. This has been such a rich conversation, and I know you're putting out great content all the time. You got some great content coming out this year.
Yes, we do.
You already have a song that's kind of gone viral. I don't know if I can sing it. Kami sewe baba. Kami sewe baba. Is that right?
Yeah,
Am I
that's
getting it?
perfect, bro.
Oh man, that's going.
Awesome.
That song is going viral. You just wrote that. And where can people follow you so they can check out your music and what you're doing?
Kanjii Mbugua on YouTube.
We'll put the link.
Instagram,
we'll put the link in there.
Everywhere.
In the show notes.
And then you can check out our website. It's Village Worship Initiative.
villageworshipinitiative.com.
Okay. And you can get to see a little bit of the work that we're doing and just our heart for discipling the next generation.
It's awesome.
Yeah, man.
That's great.
Well, thank you for coming and being with us this weekend in DC.
So good.
And I felt like I've been in Kenya a little bit with you guys.
You have to keep on reminding us, hey guys, okay, that's a Kenyan reference. Explain to our.
That's true.
Which was perfect.
You probably need to check with your parents and find out whether they have a Kenyan lineage, because your love for Kenya is unexplainable.
It's unusual, right? So, but I love you guys. And hey, thank you all for listening. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Rate us if you're watching or listening on Spotify or Apple Music. We just really want to get this word out to other people. But thank you, Kanji, for joining us. Thank you, Pastor Kevin, for co-hosting.
Awesome.
Take care.